everybody's been talking about the Trump case regarding presidential immunity. What does it mean? What doesn't mean? Some people have intimated now, I think it was Justice Sotomayor talked about now the President of the United States could get members of SEAL Team 6 to kill political opponents, and I think that's pushing the envelope a little too far and a bit much. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what does this case mean? What does it mean for today? What does it mean for the cases involving President Trump? What does it involve for possible presidents going forward and in the future? So the Supreme Court did what it usually does in tough cases. It created a test. And in this case, it created what I would say is a three-part test for future courts to look at whether or not to assess whether or not a president has immunity from criminal prosecution. And what the court stated was the following. One, for official acts, those acts that are enumerated in the Constitution as executive power and privilege, those involve absolute immunity. And that kind of is a natural progression from the Nixon case, which involved civil causes of action, meaning a president being sued civilly. Then the courts talked about if it's an unofficial act, there is no immunity. Common sense, right? The tough part is in the middle, and that is these issues or actions of a president that are, as the court talked about, the outer periphery of official acts. Now, that type of scenario involves what the court enumerated and mentioned was a rebuttable presumption of immunity, meaning that if the government chose to prosecute a president, they would have to rebut the presumption of immunity. They would have to basically lay out in facts why the action of the president was, one, not an official act, and also not part of this grayer area, this outer periphery of official acts. Then at that point, the president is fair game for a government agency to prosecute. That's it. That's all the case stood for. And then it was sent back down to the district court to assess, based on the facts of the January 6th case, whether or not this was official acts that the president was involved in at that time, or whether or not they were unofficial acts. So I think it's very interesting. It's going to be very interesting going forward. Hopefully there aren't a lot of prosecutions of presidents going forward. We don't want to see that. But I think it creates some kind of ground rules and some tests. This is not over. This is going to be the subject of more and more litigation going forward. Couple things. I've seen questions, I've received questions both through DMs and also in phone calls about certain scenarios. What does this mean? So can President Biden, is he immune, and can he reinstate Roe versus Wade? Can President Biden do this? Can President Biden do that? So I think what's important to point out is, one, I'll answer it this way. President Biden can't reinstate Roe versus Wade because of the fact that that is not an official act, and he cannot legislate in and of himself, and he cannot rule judicially in and of himself. Additionally, it's open some of these questions as what is an official act as it refers to declaring war, for example. That's an enumerated power under the Constitution for the executive branch. So this is just the beginning, and we'll do more videos on this going forward. And the court's concern that the court initially brought up regarding COVID. I understand that. I think we all recognize the significance of that pandemic. But in this case, these are commercial leases, and all the government action did was transfer the burden from one business owner to another. And that's not effectuating the type of government interest that the Jacobson cases seek to.